Welcome to Leading Through Disruptions. Our facilitator is Dawn Houghton. She's an innovation consultant with over 40 years of experience. She's led CPG and B2B innovation teams, delivering billions in global new product initiatives. Welcome, Dawn.
Hi, Gene.
Always good to talk to you. Theme number 6, disruption predictors. Can we really predict disruption?
Well, this is the theme and what we're going to talk about today. What we've learned throughout this board is that it's very difficult to get the timing right on disruption, whether you are trying to be the disruptive one in the market or whether you are living in a disruptive market and trying to figure out how to react. It's very important to get the timing right. So in this theme, we ask people what companies do to be able to predict when disruption will happen so they can get their timing right.
You put together a great panel of thought leaders. Tell us about these people.
Yes, we have a great group, very diverse from many countries, many different disciplines. They've been very active on this board for almost 3 months now. It's been a great board.
So in your executive summary, you're going to tell us exactly how to predict disruption.
That's right. Disruption is very difficult to predict. As we've learned throughout this panel, the cause or the reason why there is disruption is that there is an unmet need, and usually there's some new approach or technology that allows kind of a game-changing way to meet that need. So 3 key things in our executive summary: know that customer, know your business, track the trends and follow the money, because that's a good indicator of what's happening in the market, and then be ready to go, whether that means you're going to innovate or disrupt or whether you're going to have to react to other disruptions in the market.
And I guess to anybody who had to take a cab before Uber, we know what it's like when customers' needs are not met, and then somebody comes along that meets all those needs. And that takes us to key point number 1, right? You must know when your customer's unhappy.
That's right. So disruption really happens when there is a way to better meet customer needs. And some ways to figure that out are to understand what, say, a leading edge consumer is wanting. So Don is talking about creating kind of a panel of leading edge target users so you can understand them. Famita's talking about dissatisfiers. If customers are unhappy, they're looking for alternatives, and that means that the market is ripe. And then Ricardo talks about observing the startups. So these are all good ways to understand if customer needs are ripe for disruption.
One way to know how the customer's happiness is, follow the money, right?
That's right. So when you can track something that is numeric and can be graphed and trended, those are good numbers to track. But there's a lot of different numbers that you can look at. And one, of course, is money. Where the money is going is very powerful, whether that be about investments or bankruptcies, funding of projects or those types of things, sales, profits, all these things provide insights. So Rob is talking about following that money in terms of venture capital, and Falguni is also talking about monitoring venture capital. And Jay, of course, is bringing up the point I started with, which is quantitative is always better than qualitative.
What are some other ways we might predict disruption?
So there's many resources that you can use, whether they be internal or external to the company. Some of these are futurists, this whole new discipline. Typically, big companies will have a futurist. They may also work with external futurists whose job it is to kind of predict the scenarios of the future. Nick is talking here about academia. When you think about development, say, of technology, you can usually, a few years before it becomes a business, it's being researched at universities. And so looking at where funding is going in academia can tell you some of the potential disruptions that are coming in the future. Michael talks about just reading analyst forecasts can be very helpful because analysts, they can predict size and growth of different markets. So finding analysts to follow is another way to predict disruption.
Now, for somebody who really wants to follow this information, kind of predict all this stuff, what tools can they use to do that?
Right. So tools typically we look at this as kind of a tracking system. Some of the things that are very easy to track, patent filings. This is available as public information. You can see what patents have been filed, what technologies they're talking about. Jay talks about alternative data, looking for something that might give you a clue of what's happening in the market, though it's not exactly what you're looking for. Ulissa talks about how in the future, and maybe even starting now, artificial intelligence will be able to do the tracking for you or help to predict. So that's kind of like a prediction of disruption, is that AI could be used to find disruption in the future.
And then in key point number 5, you talk about government. Explain this.
So government and regulation are things that can immediately disrupt the market. Another thing that comes from the government is funding, so grant funding. This kind of is similar to the academia one. You can see where the government is investing in funding of research projects. And then Rob talks about PEST, which is the acronym for political, economic, social, and technology. And those are the kind of the 4 types of trends that can happen external to the company and create a change that you're going to have to live with. Things like, let's say, how energy is used, or some of the social changes we see going on and political changes that we see going on in the world today. So those are all things that could indicate that disruption is coming.
So in addition to all of this empirical data, there does come a moment when you just got to check your gut, right?
Yes, that's right. So whether this is the last point or the first point, I think an important thing to note is that prediction can be kind of an intuitive thing. Rob talked about how there was a study done on how to kind of uncover disruption. And when you find a disruption, determine, how big is it? What will it mean to your business? And then using design thinking, how can you satisfy the customer in a way that will head off that disruption? And Sumant talks about creating your own prediction model framework, this idea of having a custom model in your company that's looking for specific changes. It kind of systematizes it and creates a framework that can be used. These are all great points for how to prepare for disruption and how to kind of get that timing right and, know when it's coming and what you need to do.
Well, Dawn, this has been a great discussion, a great panel. Tell us about these 3 that stood out.
Yes. So the top 3 contributors this theme were Sumant, Rob, and Jay, and they have all provided some great insight on ways to predict disruption. And they've been continually great contributors on this board. Since this is actually our last topic, I do want to also take a chance to thank our other top contributors.
And I'll take a moment to thank you, our great facilitator, Dawn Houghton. She has over 40 years experience as an innovation consultant. She's led CPG and B2B innovation teams deliver literally billions in global new product initiatives. And we are honored to have you facilitate this panel. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Gene.